And well, good afternoon, actually. And thank you very much, Passan, for inviting me to do this. It felt like a real privilege. I've known Passan for a few years, and the moment I met him, thought what a nice man he was. And in the last few years, have realised what a hugely professional and an effective and popular teacher he is too. So I was delighted to be asked. And seeing the quality of the presentation from Peter as well makes me feel like part of a really great team. I really enjoyed that. I switched my camera off because one of the things I think about teaching is that teachers really enjoy interacting with people. It's a real pleasure. And when you don't get anything back, and I thought probably everyone is having a giggle, that was a good joke. And I was smiling all the way through. And I thought in my lessons, when the children and the students smile back at me, I'm like, yes, I'm a superhero, which is kind of where I started my presentation. So I thought I had to give some of that back to you, Peter. Teachers are so important, and I think that everyone who's here today on a Saturday afternoon, still here now as well after a couple of hours and running a little bit late and so on, are so important, so important. The idea that we are heroes is problematic because we need the children to be the heroes. We need to be empowering them to do the work. We don't want to do all the work for them. We don't want to be saviors. That's not effective teaching. But I think the point I'm making here is not that we're heroes, it's that we're really important. In the US recently, some research showed that teachers are the second highly most valued people in the country, professional-wise. I mean, the top was soldiers, and I think that probably reflects more on an American perception of the world now. But I suspect in other countries, teachers would be right up there. And that makes me, firstly, be very excited. I absolutely love my job. But I also think something that teachers need to hear is that you need to look after yourself as well. So going the extra mile and doing all the things that are important for your students, of course, that's what we're here about today. But you can't pour out of an empty cup. So the first thing I think is when you go in and you start the new term off, ring fence some time that's for you. So make sure that you are sleeping enough. And if you haven't done the marking and it's time to sleep, stop and go to sleep. And I say the same thing to my students. If you haven't done your homework and it's 10 o'clock at night, stop and go to sleep. So I suppose as well that ties in with the message Peter was saying about being role models. I love that. We should be reading. We should say to them, I read this in the holiday. I saw this magazine article. I went to this seminar. But also now I'm back at work. I am stopping at 10. I didn't finish your marking and I will. So it's about being organised, but we do need to protect our time. And I try and protect a slot once a week at school where I can run. Or if it's that you're protecting time when you travel to work, if you're on a train or if you're walking, that time is for you to think or you to read and not for you to be worrying about work. So do ring fence your time. Share your ideas, share them with other teachers. I've been teaching for 15 years and I hear things all the time and think, oh yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try that. I never feel patronised by colleagues because the teachers who are coming through now in education are NQTs who've been taught new, fresh material this year. They've got lots to share, and teachers who've been teaching for 50, 60 years, perhaps not quite that long, but a long time, have got lots to share. So always be sharing. Look after yourself and be aware that will then influence the pupils that you're teaching. You're modelling that sleeping, being active, and so on. That said, the children do need to be working the hardest in the room. And I sometimes feel myself going into this mode where I'm presenting and talking and doing my jokes. And then I'm like, hold on, I'm exhausted. They should be working much, much harder. And again, as Peter said, they work hard for you because they know you care. They know you've prepared a good lesson for them and you want them to do well. In all the different schools I've taught in, and I've taught in a variety of state and private schools, and I've been supply teacher for quite a long time when I was doing a master's, and I've taught physics, chemistry, biology, and psychology. And across all those subjects, all those children, all secondary, I haven't taught much primary, but my mum was a primary teacher, and we've talked about this as well, something she said to me at the very start of my career. Teachers need to make their pupils feel liked. So all people need to feel liked. We all need that. And we can pretend that we don't worry what people think. We don't care. Humans need to feel liked. We're a social species. We need the people around us to like us. We don't want to obviously be, desperately seeking approval, but particularly for teenagers, they need to feel liked, and they can tell if you're faking that as well, which means your responsibility is to find something you like in all your pupils. Sometimes I find that quite easy. So I play a lot of netball, and the girls who play netball, we get on straight away because we have netball in common. And there might be boys who I've taught lower down the school biology, and we get on because we know each other for a while, so we've got some history. But there might be some new pupils who come in and they see that I'm getting on well with the other students in the class, and they will then feel they're not liked. And you've probably all heard children say, oh, that teacher hates me. And I hear students I teach say that about my colleagues, and I think, well, they don't. I know they don't. I know they like them, but we have to make sure that our pupils feel that we like them. So we need to build relationships. We need to find something to share, and it can be anything. But I firmly believe that everybody's got something about them to like. And as professionals, we can find that. I read some research recently about some children, 4 to 5-year-olds, who were asked to play with strangers, other children. And then after that playtime, they rated how much they thought the stranger child liked them. And the 4-year-olds were quite good at it. They got it about right. But by the time the children were 5, they were rating themselves lower than the stranger child had rated them. So basically they thought they were less liked than they were. And sadly, that seems to decline. The research was just with small children, but I would imagine with teenagers, there's even more of a sense that they're not liked. So I think it's really important. On that front, sorry, the slide I skipped past, I've forgotten I was going to say this was about influence, this one about the intangibles of teaching. I saw this. I suspect most teachers, this is from the US, this data, I suspect most teachers outside the US will actually teach more than 3,000 students over the course of their career, because they'll have bigger classes possibly. I did a quick calculation myself, and I think probably that's where I'm heading for, but I'm at a private school with small classes. But if you consider that influence, that each person here is taking with them something that can influence 3,000 other people, teachers are really important. Probably said that enough times. So this being liked, I think another way into making sure our pupils feel liked and feel safe is that they know we are fair. We have a really strong sense of fairness, particularly, again, young children. So what I've got here is, I don't know if you can see the whole screen. I'll just move that down there. Okay, so this is some identical answers. The left-hand one says, I was with my brother Connor and his friend Scott, but it was a great day to be a boy at home. And the other side is identical, apart from the name in this side is changed to a less American name. So Deshawn but it was an Aaron. So sorry, it's not actually so much less American as, I suppose, less academic sounding. Now, I've used this example because I wanted to talk to you about how we have to be fair with our marking. Research in the UK has shown that if you give teachers identical papers, identical essays, they will score the more Anglican sounding name higher than the less Anglican sounding name. So a name like James or Charlotte or Sarah would score higher than a name like Aisha, Deshawn. I can't think of the names using the example, but Anglican versus non-Anglican, that was consistent that those names of identical essays scored lower. It's the same with handwriting. Worse handwriting scores lower, even if the content is identical. In English essays, girls get higher scores than boys in identical work. In maths, boys get higher scores than girls in identical work. And in this research, the boy who'd written this, the fictitious boy, scored higher when he named Connor and Scott than Deshawn and Aaron. Now, when the researchers gave the teachers a scoring frame to use, so rather than it being, what do you think, what's this score, they were given a frame with a very specific criteria, things leveled up. And interestingly, it was mostly the white female teachers who had a gap, and black male teachers had less of a gap, which would suggest that we're better at removing bias if we're part of the community that are being prejudiced against, which doesn't solve the problem, because obviously the majority of teachers in the UK are white and female. So that's not helping black male pupils. So we need to be really aware of what our specific prejudices are. Now, this obviously will depend on where we're teaching and the groups that we're interacting with and so on. But I think the really important thing is that rather than looking at prejudice and thinking, I don't do that, we look at it and think, where is it creeping into what I'm doing? So this is just a few ideas on how we can try to be fair. We can anonymize the children's work. This is particularly important in exams. I know when you're teaching, in primary, you can't do that because you obviously be sitting with the child, but we still can go to that conversation, go to that interaction without our thinking, oh, this is this child, they'll probably be a bit weak or they'll probably be quite strong. So in secondary, we can anonymize, we can get them to write codes on their work. And if we've got a pile of papers in front of us of 20 papers, 20 booklets, we mark question 1 for every single paper and then do question 2. And that helps to keep it anonymous. That's how examiners would do it, as well as Peter will be aware. I've done a little bit of examining myself and similarly found we remove our prejudices. But we still, if we've marked a lot of mediocre papers and get a good one, give the good one an excessively high score. So it's about knowing that that prejudice exists. Teachers will score pupils higher if they've had a break and a snack than if they haven't. So when we get tired, we get more negative and we mark worse. So all this sort of thing, it seems like it's quite small, but to students, it's so important. We can peer review, swap with colleagues to make sure that they believe we've got the marking in the same places we have. And of course, this marking criteria, a detailed rubric, which is just a grid saying for question 1, if they've used this terminology or they've used these words or this phrasing or whatever it is, that will gain this level of marking. I think I'm talking too fast, sorry. So I just found this image, which I think perhaps highlights some of the potential areas for where we may have prejudices and bias. And I think about this as well, not just in my classroom teaching, but in my sports coaching. So as I coach the netball team, and I'm usually expecting the taller girls to be better at netball than the shorter girls. And again, that's as it's prejudice, it means that the shorter girls are less likely to get in the first team. It's not acceptable. So I have to think hard on that and really look at their play and not what I think a good netballer looks like. Okay. This is the last thing I want to talk about, and this is this wonderful idea that in teaching, we're all different. And when I was first teaching, one of my colleagues said to me, there's 3 things you have to do to be a good teacher. Know your material, find a way with the kids, and know your material. And at the time, I found that quite overwhelming because my subject knowledge wasn't very good. But I did love that middle idea he had, find a way with the kids. There's not one way to do this. In the same way, in a rainforest, there's not one way for a plant to thrive. All the plants need some light, water, and a soil that has certain minerals in. And all our pupils need to feel safe. We think about Maslow's hierarchy of need. They need to be fed. They need to feel liked. But once they've got the basics in place, there are many different ways we can help those pupils thrive. And there are many different ways we can all do that as individuals. And each plant in our classroom, in our rainforest, is going to thrive with slightly different conditions. So today, there may be things that I've said and suggested that aren't take-homes for you. You think that won't work for me, and that's fine. Reflect on what you do and don't like. And there might be things you think I will have a go at that and I'll do that. And that'll be the same for me today. So what do your learners need? You know them much better than anyone else. And what can you take with you today that will help them using the skills you've got? Because as I said, there's not one way to do this. Embrace your strengths. We are all different. As I said, we're all different teachers. All our pupils are different, and everybody thrives in different conditions. I had a wonderful maths teacher when I was in year 2 who turned around my perception of myself as a learner. I thought I was terrible at maths, and I ended the year thinking that I was really good at maths. I had classmates who didn't like him at all, thought he was awful. And I suppose that made me a bit sad, but I also thought, well, everybody is different, so we have to play to our strengths. Embrace them and then experiment. Keep trying different things. I will definitely be taking more photographs to put into my slideshow. I love that idea. I love having new ideas to try. And then just finally, I want to finish off. There are lots of great jobs you can do in society. but none of them are quite as great or quite as important or as profound as the life of a teacher.